Time in business is not an abstraction. It is not a philosophical category. It is a cost, a competitive weapon, and the thin line between a project that actually launches and an idea that dies quietly inside a binder. In the West, entrepreneurs have learned to treat time as something you endure. Months of waiting for permits, weeks for an agency response, endless document revisions, meetings that produce not a decision but the scheduling of the next meeting. A system that moves slowly, yet consistently. A system that protects stability, but often kills momentum. In the Middle East, time has been converted into money, literally. Every day of delay is lost revenue. Every month of hesitation is an opening for competitors to move first. Every year of stagnation is a missed window that will not return. This is why states across the region began treating decision speed as an economic strategy in itself, not merely as a technical feature of administration. The contrast begins at the level of mentality. In much of Europe, process is sacred. Procedure is frequently treated as more important than outcome. Compliance often outranks effectiveness. In the Middle East, results carry heavier weight. If a project makes strategic sense, if it aligns with national priorities, generates jobs, attracts capital, and produces prestige, administration receives a clear signal. This must happen quickly. That does not mean there are no rules. It means the hierarchy of priorities is different. Decision first, paperwork second, project first, system adjustment afterward. In the Gulf in particular, the logic is not prove it's possible and then decide. It is decide it is necessary and then make it possible. You can see this most clearly in the delivery of mega projects. Cities built from zero, financial districts rising in a handful of years, ports that would be debated, litigated, and negotiated for decades in Europe. Here, executed at a pace that looks almost implausible to Western bureaucracies. This is not a technological miracle. It is the effect of centralized decision-making. In many Gulf states, executive power is not immobilized by multi-stage political bargaining. When a strategic decision is made, bureaucracy receives the green light to act. It does not have to negotiate with dozens of competing institutions. It does not wait for coalition compromise. It does not spend years in public consultations designed to reduce conflict rather than accelerate delivery. The entire system is built to move when the top wants movement. For business, the result is a fundamentally different experience. A project that requires years of preparatory friction in Europe can move from concept to implementation in months. Company registration, licensing, building permits, infrastructure access, visa processes. These mechanisms are increasingly designed not to stop capital at the entry gate. Yet the real advantage is not simply that officials answer faster. The deeper advantage is the structure of the state itself. In Western economies, economic authority is dispersed. Part sits with central government, part with municipalities, part with independent regulators, part with supranational institutions. Each layer has its own procedures, its own tempo, its own interest map. The outcome is a system resilient against sudden shifts, but slow to adapt, slow to synchronize, slow to execute. In much of the Middle East, the structure is more vertical. Strategic decisions are made at the top. Administration functions as an executive instrument. This allows coordination at scale. When a state decides to develop a technology sector, it can launch education programs, build infrastructure, introduce tax incentives, create special economic zones, and run investor attraction campaigns in parallel, moving to the same rhythm, pushing in the same direction, reinforcing one another. That rhythm is not a stylistic choice. It is the core of competitive advantage. Because time in business is not only about launching quickly, it is also about reacting quickly. When a new technology emerges, when business models shift, when investment trends move, Gulf states often adjust regulations with remarkable speed. They create frameworks for fintech, update rules for crypto and blockchain, introduce early guidelines for AI, build startup zones with tailored governance. These are not cosmetic reforms. They are attempts to keep pace with global innovation, sometimes even to anticipate it rather than chasing it years later. For entrepreneurs, this creates an environment that does not merely tolerate growth, it often accelerates it. Where European law frequently trails technology by several years, parts of the Middle East try to close the gap, or at minimum avoid becoming the reason innovation stalls. The same logic applies to the migration of talent. In many Western countries, visas are slow, complex, and full of administrative traps. In the Gulf, states have built fast-track visa pathways for specialists, founders, investors, and senior managers. The visa is not treated as a barrier. It is treated as an instrument of economic policy. The message is explicit. We need talent. We need expertise. We need people capable of building new sectors, and the migration system is redesigned accordingly. That allows international teams to assemble faster, projects to be staffed with global competence, and companies to avoid months of waiting for work permits for key personnel. But speed has a price, and that price is not always visible at first glance. A system that moves quickly often requires trust in centralized authority. It requires acceptance of concentrated decision-making. It requires comfort with the fact that processes are not fully transparent. For many Western entrepreneurs, this is a cultural shock. They miss familiar procedures. They miss formal appeals. They miss the sense that the system is neutral and controllable. In the Middle East, control sits with the state. Business is, in a sense, a guest inside a development project, not the owner of the environment in which it operates. This demands a different operating posture. Instead of fighting the system, you learn how to function within it. You build relationships, you study priorities, you understand which projects have a green light and which will be blocked regardless of their economic logic. The model rewards companies that can operate flexibly, absorb context, and align strategy with the direction set by the state. For startups, this can be a powerful advantage. Fast testing, rapid scaling, entry into a regional market before competitors have even finished their paperwork elsewhere. For major corporations, it enables infrastructure and technology deployments that might be politically or administratively impossible in Europe. Yet for smaller entrepreneurs, the same speed can become a challenge. A fast system is also a fast-changing system. Regulations can update dynamically. Support programs can end abruptly. State priorities can shift. That requires continuous monitoring and constant readiness to adapt. In that sense, the Middle East offers tempo, but not the comfort of the deep institutional stability many European systems provide. It is dynamic, project-driven, and tied to national visions that can evolve as government strategy evolves. Decision speed also shapes business culture itself. Meetings are shorter, negotiations are more direct, waiting for answers is less tolerated, partners are calibrated to pace, and those who move slowly fall out of the game. The region generates pressure for efficiency, specificity, and operational readiness. For many Western entrepreneurs, it is a shock, but also a source of business energy that they no longer feel in saturated, process-heavy markets. What emerges is a state-level version of startup mentality. Test in reality, scale what works, abandon what doesn't, experiment quickly, implement quickly, correct in motion. Compared with Europe's heavy emphasis on long planning cycles and regulatory caution, it is a different philosophy of action. This is why time has become one of the region's most significant competitive advantages, not only as administrative speed, but as an organizing principle. Because in a world where global competition accelerates, advantage increasingly belongs to those who decide faster than others. Not always perfectly, not without mistakes, but faster. The Middle East has built a system that rewards pace, compresses the distance between idea and execution, and allows companies to operate in the rhythm of global markets rather than local procedures. That is why more firms now view the region not only through taxes or labor costs, but through time itself. In many sectors, money does not decide success. Speed does. And time, once lost, does not return. Which leads to the next question. Why does the Middle East sit at the center of global trade? No technology has abolished geography. We can build digital platforms, move finance into the cloud, automate factories, and transmit data at the speed of light, but physical goods still have to float, fly, drive, and arrive. A container must dock at a port, a plane must land on a runway, a truck must enter a warehouse. And here, the Middle East holds an advantage that cannot be legislated into existence or subsidized into parity. The region sits precisely where the major axes of global commerce intersect, between Asia and Europe, between Africa and Asia, between East and West. This is not metaphor, it is logistics math, distances, transit times, route optimization, real savings that matter more to supply chains than most marketing slogans ever will. For decades, the Middle East was treated as a transit corridor, an area goods passed through, but one that did not fully control the game. The Suez Canal, key straits, maritime routes, the region appeared as a point on the map, not a decision center. As Gulf states developed strategic consciousness, they began to understand a hard truth. Whoever controls logistics controls the tempo of the global economy. That is why investment shifted from ports alone to full logistics ecosystems. Container terminals, transshipment hubs, free zones, warehousing parks, cargo airports, rail links, highways, built to transform the region from a stop along the route into a place where goods are taken over, sorted, processed, repackaged, financed, insured, and redistributed. This is a structural change. If you are only transit, you earn fees. If you become a logistics hub, you earn across the value chain: storage, packaging, light manufacturing, trade finance, insurance, auxiliary services. The Middle East began playing that game deliberately. Ports in the region are no longer simply unloading points. They are anchors around which entire logistics cities emerge. Hundreds of hectares of warehouses, global brand distribution centers, zones where goods from China, India, and Southeast Asia are split across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East itself. The region is no longer merely shortening delivery times, it is becoming an essential component of supply chains. Companies do not build operations there out of sentiment. They do it because the economics work. Yet maritime geography is only one layer. The second is aviation. The Middle East has become one of the world's largest air hub systems, and not merely for tourists. These airports function as cargo nodes, moving high-value goods, electronics, pharmaceuticals, industrial components, time-sensitive products where speed is not a convenience but a business requirement. Geography again multiplies the advantage. From a single hub in the region, a company can reach most major markets, Europe, Asia, Africa, India, within hours. That time advantage is priceless in industries where delivery speed reshapes the entire operational model. When firms can ship from a Middle Eastern distribution center and reach multiple continents the same day, they reduce the need for scattered warehouses, shorten supply cycles, and cut inventory costs. This is not a logistical detail. It is an architectural change in global trade. The third layer is land infrastructure. Highways, railways, connections between ports and industrial zones, billions invested so goods do not stall at the waterfront. The container that arrives in port can reach warehouse, factory, or airport within hours. This creates a scale effect. The better the infrastructure, the more firms want to use it. The more firms use it, the more it becomes rational to expand it. A self-reinforcing mechanism emerges. In Europe, logistics infrastructure often faces spatial constraints, social protest, environmental challenges, and political disputes. In the Middle East, infrastructure is built as a strategic project, top-down, large-scale, with fewer stakeholder veto points. That accelerates delivery, and it buys the region time. But the most important layer of this puzzle is not physical. It is strategic. The Middle East understood that control of logistics is a form of power, not military power, but economic power. If your ports are essential to trade routes, other states must account for you. If your air hubs move millions of tons of cargo, companies become dependent on your system. If your logistics zones are integrated into supply chains, you cannot be easily bypassed. That creates a new geopolitical posture. The region stops being a peripheral supplier of commodities and becomes a node inside the global trade operating system. For entrepreneurs, the implication is blunt. If you want proximity to flows of goods, capital, and information, the Middle East provides access to these currents in a way few regions can match. But geography alone does not do the work. It must be organized, and here we return to the role of the state. Governments treat logistics as strategic infrastructure. They invest not for short-term political gain, but for long-term competitive advantage. They shape legal frameworks in favor of logistics firms, offer incentives, build free zones, simplify customs, compress documentation, reduce friction. The result is an environment where international trade can operate faster, cheaper, and more smoothly. For e-commerce, that means serving multiple markets from a single distribution center. For manufacturers, it means accessing global demand without building fragmented infrastructure. For logistics operators, it means volume concentration and the scale efficiencies that follow. Yet geography also brings risk. The region sits where the interests of the world's largest players collide. Trade routes are also strategic routes. Regional conflicts, political tensions, the risk of disruption, these are part of Middle Eastern reality. That is why states invest not only in infrastructure, but in the security of trade corridors, port protection, political stability, international partnerships. Those security costs are built into the model. For business, this means opportunity comes bundled with geopolitical exposure. Firms must understand they operate in a strategically sensitive space. They must monitor developments, diversify routes, and build contingency plans. But for many, this still feels like a more manageable risk than operating inside Western systems weighed down by regulatory overload, energy shocks, and internal political polarization. This is why the Middle East is becoming more than a shortcut on the map. It is becoming a new logistics center of the global economy. Not because it is the richest, not because it is the most liberal, but because it sits where trade flows intersect, and it learned how to exploit that position. Geography gave the region a chance, strategy turned it into advantage, and business, as always, moves toward the route that is shortest, fastest, and most profitable. Eventually, every economy reaches the same point. You can have capital, infrastructure, low taxes, and fast administrative decisions. But if you lack people who buy, work, learn, move between social classes, and upgrade their aspirations, the economy starts to resemble a beautiful set with no actors. And here, the Middle East holds an advantage that Europe and East Asia increasingly struggle to even discuss honestly. The region is young, not only in age, but in mindset, ambition, consumption patterns. This youth is not a romantic metaphor. It is a hard demographic structure that will decide where new markets, new business models, and new demand centers are born in the coming decades. While Europe is aging at a pace that resembles slow internal market contraction, and Japan has long been trapped in demographic stagnation, the Middle East is moving into the mass adulthood of a generation raised on the internet, smartphones, and global aspiration. This generation does not want to live like their parents. It does not want to depend solely on public sector careers or wait for assigned roles. It wants income, consumption, travel, investment, and ownership of personal projects. This is the moment when demography becomes an economic engine. A young population means labor markets not yet saturated. It means demand for education, training, digital tools, productivity platforms. It drives mobile banking, e-commerce, subscription entertainment, and the digital infrastructure that in Europe is already mature, while in the region is still being built at speed. But youth is not only age, it is also a stage of social development. Much of the Middle East is moving through processes Europe went through decades earlier. Rapid urbanization, migration from smaller communities into major cities, the expansion of a middle class, changing lifestyles, a shift from local shops to malls and online platforms, from traditional entertainment to digital ecosystems. Each shift creates room for business. Every social transition produces new needs, new services, new consumption patterns. In Europe, markets are saturated. A new product often has to replace an old one. A new brand must steal customers from competitors. In parts of the Middle East, entire segments are still forming. It is not always about taking a customer from someone else. Often, it is about building a market that did not exist before. For entrepreneurs, this changes the game. You can enter early, build position from zero, educate consumers, shape habits, define user expectations that become standards for years. The market is not cemented by decades of competition. It is still being written. The region's demography has another defining feature: extreme diversity. In many Middle Eastern states, a large share of the population consists of migrant workers, specialists, laborers, managers, engineers, founders from South Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. These societies become multilingual, multicultural, multi-market microcosms. For business, this is both challenge and advantage. Challenge, because products and communication must fit multiple cultural groups. Advantage, because one local market begins to resemble a miniature version of the global market. A company that learns to sell in Dubai, Riyadh, or Doha often acquires capabilities that scale globally more easily. The region becomes a stress test for international strategy. This diversity also fuels consumption across levels. Different lifestyles, needs, and aspirations generate demand ranging from mass services to premium luxury, from online education to private healthcare, from budget tech solutions to the most expensive gadgets on Earth. The Middle East is a market of contrasts, extremely wealthy consumers alongside millions aspiring toward middle-class life. And that aspirational segment is one of the most strategically interesting, because the middle class does not only consume, it invests into children's education, into health, into technology, into housing, into mobility. These are markets that grow for decades. States in the region understand this. That is why they invest in education, digitization, and youth activation programs, not only for social stability, but for economic logic. A young population without jobs becomes a risk. A young population with ambition and market access becomes a growth engine. This is where startup incubators, entrepreneurship programs, youth funds, e-learning platforms emerge. They are part of a larger project to build a generation that will not remain merely a consumer within an oil-based economy, but a producer of value-added output. For foreign firms, the signal is important. The region does not want to be only a market. It wants to become a production space for knowledge, services, and technology. Companies entering now are not only entering for customers, they are entering for talent. And here another advantage appears: social mobility. In many regional systems, career progression can be faster than in Europe. Fewer closed professional guilds, fewer rigid credential barriers, more room for rapid adaptation. This attracts ambitious professionals from across the world. For business, it means access to a labor market filled with people willing to work intensely, learn quickly, shift across sectors, an ecosystem suited to high-speed projects and scaling companies. Yet, demography also carries risk. Youth creates pressure on labor markets. Millions of jobs must be created, social stability must be maintained, rising expectations must be managed as aspirations often grow faster than wages. For states, this is a challenge. For business, it is also opportunity, because structural challenges generate demand for solutions. HR technology, education platforms, automation, productivity services. In this sense, the Middle East is not a settled market. It is a market still forming, shaping itself in real time. And that is why it attracts companies capable of operating within change. Europe offers stability. The Middle East offers dynamism. Europe offers a mature market. The Middle East offers a growth phase market. Europe offers predictability. The Middle East offers potential. This is the choice more entrepreneurs are now forced to confront. Fight for marginal percentages in saturated markets, or build position in markets still taking shape. Demography is the quiet protagonist of this story, without headlines, without conference spectacle, but with immense force, because in 20 years, today's young residents of the region will decide which apps dominate, which brands win, which companies rise, and which business models become standard. A business that wants to be there then has to be there now. The Middle East is not only a market of the present, it is a market of a future that is being born in real time.